introduce Denver Miller and Michael Glavin, who will be speaking with you today about Tauck video. Denver, Michael, take it away.
Hey guys, thanks very much, Dustin. It's great. Thanks so much for all of you to join us today. This is a fun one. Dustin and I have had the pleasure of working with Denver over the last several years as we've been trying to shoot the Tauck experience around the world. And it's been a wonderful, really fun project. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Denver is, we're really lucky to have him. He's an incredible cinematographer and editor. Tauck does, almost all of their creative at Tauck is done in-house, but of course we use experts to add the talent and experience that we lack internally, perhaps. But you know, all of our brochures, all of our marketing materials are done by our creative department. With video, we have an internal video team, Kate Bushel and Phil McDonald, who are fantastic. And then we hire people like Denver to go around the world and shoot. And usually one of us will be with them. We produce the shoot, come up with a shot list and the idea behind the videos. And it's really become a very important part of marketing travel, because you know, YouTube is the second largest search engine after Google in the world. You have to have video content. Travel is the ideal product for video, because you can really show what you do. You can show the experience. And you know, we want to try to capture the real Tauck experience. We don't use models. Peter Tauck is our voiceover. We write our own scripts. So it's a real Tauck, you know, produced marketing material. And Denver gives us a lot of credibility that we don't have, because he's has an extraordinary experience, lifetime of shooting, and is a fantastic editor. So without further ado, I just wanted to call out, because you know, we often have had multiple shoots back to back, so we do use other people. Daniel Miller and U Direct Productions in New York, they've shot over 150 videos with Ken Burns and myself over the last 10 years. So they're an important video partner as well. Chuck May shoots all of our events. So it's we've got this Greg Tobler, who's our ace audio editor. He's amazing. Does the mixes for Paul Simon. And anyway, a lot of fun people to work with. And Denver has just been such a joy to travel with, and I have so much respect for his talent. So Denver, without further ado, how did you get into the film business? How did you become a filmmaker?
Oh boy, that's a long story. First of all, thank you, Michael and Dustin, for having me, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. For me, I came into film and video production, like a lot of people, I think, through the still photography route. And it started very young. I had a grandfather who I was very close with, spent a lot of time with growing up, and he was, you know, an avid hobbyist photographer, and an absolute passionate traveler. Loved to travel. Anytime, any chance he got, he and my grandmother would hit the road and take to the airs, to the waters, however they could travel around the world. And he always took these photos. And he had this little office in his house. He called it his study. And it was wall to wall, floor to ceiling photographs that he had taken from all over the world. And I remember vividly, he had this little swivel chair at his desk. And, you know, as a 4, 5, 6-year-old, I would go in there and just sit in that swivel chair and spin around and look at all these photos and just, you know, imagine what it was like to go to all these places. And so, and he always had cameras around. And so I grew up, you know, both with an interest in travel through his eyes and with him always putting cameras in my hands. So it started very young for me. And I, you know, kind of progressed through. I grew up an outdoor kid, grew up on the Gulf of Mexico, south of Houston, Texas, right near the bay. And we were outside all the time, fishing, picking up crabs and swimming and, you know, taking boats out, whatever we could do to be outside all the time. So I had that going on, and that sort of progressed to, you know, just a life of wanting to be outdoors and having adventures. And so as I got a little older, I was always the one in our group that would take a camera and document our fun. And so that I just kept building on that. And when I went to college and learned that I could actually, you know, study something along those lines, I was excited. And so I did study in school. I came away with a media arts degree, a Bachelor of Media Arts, which kind of combined photography, film, broadcast journalism, and you know, various other visual arts. And so it was a great way for me to kind of, you know, get exposure to other people and learn a few things. But I really didn't honestly get started on a professional level until a few years after college. And when I had an opportunity to go to work for an independent film producer, he hired me for a week to be a production assistant, go for something that was happening. I was living in New Mexico at the time. And he had a project going on, and he just needed somebody around the studio. And so I really hustled and worked hard, and that week turned into about a 5-year-long stint with his company, and he became a mentor to me. His name was Alton Walpole, and a company called Mountaineer Films in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he worked with a lot of really influential filmmakers of the time, documentary filmmakers primarily. And so I right away got, within a year or so, had the opportunity to go travel with them and learn kind of the tricks and the tools of the trade, if you will. And that's when I really started learning and decided, hey, this is what I want to do. I'm going to take this and run with it.
Denver, how long did you shoot film before you switched to digital?
Yeah, so when I first came into it, it was all film. There was, you know, now college was an exception. We had these video cameras in college that we worked with. But once I got into the professional world, we were shooting film. And so, and we did some documentary, cultural documentaries, some natural history stuff, even some, you know, traditional narrative type independent films, all within that company. And yeah, it was big cameras. And I used to be you know, I came up through the camera department. So one of the beginning entry-level jobs is you're responsible for loading all that film into the mags in a dark room or in a tent, and you know, a little dark tent, and you know, you're handling that stuff. So both putting it in the cameras and taking it out and sending it to the labs. And so basically the entire weight of the production lies in your hands when you're in that dark room. And so, you know, it was a great way to learn. And we worked with film for probably up until about, sorry, my phone is talking to me here. I'm gonna put this away, excuse me. We worked with film up until the late 90s. And then things started to kind of transition into video. And really by early 2000s, it was all digital video and a huge change in the way work was done at that point. So that was, that really, I feel fortunate to have come into doing this, working with film, because there was a real discipline involved, because it takes so much more. The equipment was so much bigger. You really have to be more selective about where you point your camera and shoot, because everything is going on this film, and it's expensive. It's expensive to buy. It's expensive to process, to print. And so there was a discipline involved, I think, that I was very fortunate to learn at an early stage in my career, and then be poised to make that transition into digital video with a knowledge of the benefits of both, I guess, if you will. So.
Denver, tell us about some of the other organizations you've worked with, and some of the other you know, jobs that you've been involved with, films and TV and all of that.
Sure. So from that point, when I was working with my first, mentor and that company, Mountain Air Films, the first really big, interesting project that was a big, global travel documentary project was when I don't know if any of you have been out to Los Angeles and been to the Getty Museum, but when they built that museum, they needed a kind of a signature film that would play in their theater, beautiful museum. And so they decided to do this film about a lot of their restoration projects around the world, various things that were funded by the Getty Foundation. And so they hired a director by the name of Ron Fricke, who had a very close relationship with the producer Alton that I was working for. They had done several films together, probably the most notable of which is a film called Baraka. And if you've never seen Baraka, I'd say put it on your list. It's an amazing film. He shot that film on 70 millimeter film, in fact, which is twice the size of your typical 35 millimeter negative. Anyway, they loved the work. They wanted Ron to direct this signature film at the Getty Museum, and so they hired him, and we became the production company and traveled all around the world working on that. And it was a fantastic project. And so that was the first time I really got to go out on the road and feel what it was like to be in the trenches of documentary filmmaking. And we were in Ecuador, we were in China, we were in London, New York, Los Angeles, Mexico City, and then rural Mexico. And it was a fantastic project. And then after I left Mountain Air Films and kind of went out on my own, I ended up working. I was always into action sports, adventure sports, skiing, mountain biking, this kind of thing. And so I was able to combine, my love for that with filmmaking, and started doing some ski films with Warren Miller Films. You've probably, maybe you've heard of Warren Miller, and a couple of other companies. And so we would do these ski documentaries and mountain biking documentaries. And then I also had the opportunity to do some work with Discovery Channel in the natural history realm. So traveling and doing, nature films and television primarily with them. And then some commercial work as well for various clients. So it's really been a mixed bag, a little National Geographic. And gosh, there's more, but I can't recall right now. But it's been a wonderful road.
Any really memorable story you can tell us about shooting some of these extreme sports, or being plopped somewhere by a helicopter, and
yes, and
people off cliffs?
That's often what it was. And back when I started doing ski films, we were also shooting on film. It was before video, and so smaller film, 16 millimeter film, but still heavy equipment, and and so exactly, we'd get dropped off by a helicopter on top of some peak in Alaska with these professional skiers, and often myself and another cameraman, and we'd decide who was going to ski where and set up the camera angles, and then helicopter goes away, and you're expected to do the filming, but then also put the heavy gear, camera, tripod, everything on your back, and ski down and chase these athletes that were amazing, obviously, skiers. And it was very hard work. It sounds glamorous. Carrying a 50-pound pack, down an Alaskan mountain in snow is not always easy or glamorous, but fun nonetheless. And so, a particular story, I guess, that stands out that was actually rather frightening, but ended up having a good ending was I witnessed a friend of mine who's a professional skier get caught in an avalanche. And the one time that, and all the times I've been in the mountains filming skiing, that I actually saw someone get caught in a life-threatening avalanche situation. And he fortunately made all the right moves, and the guides that we were with did as well. And he ended up okay, just a sprained knee. But it was a horrifying thing to witness through the lens of a camera, wondering if, it was going to be a recovery rather than a rescue. And so that was a trying moment. But there's been a lot of really interesting projects in that world that I feel so fortunate to have been a part of. I mean, these amazing trips. We did one trip in British Columbia where we had about 120-foot yacht with a helicopter pad on the front of it, and we went way into rural, of course, but remote British Columbia, up these fjords and into an area that was kind of relatively uncharted and had never been skied before. And the idea was we were doing a documentary television show, and with these skiers, we were going to take the helicopter off the ship and go up into the mountains and find places to ski. And we got up there, and we were there for 10 days, and the weather turned like summer, and we never got to ski once. We just sat there on this boat in this beautiful inlet with 70-degree weather, waiting for a chance to ski, but never did. So we had a lot of fun fishing and playing and around. And then we ended up going back later that month and actually getting the ski sequences done, in about 3 days. And that was often the case because you're at the mercy of the elements.
Let's switch to Tauck.
Sure.
And a little bit about what we've been doing the last few years. And would love to play one of your edits. Let's rattle off your shoots. Just give people the idea of where you've been in the world. And why don't you start with Antarctica, because I was with you on that one, and just rattle off where you've been, where you've shot. Probably over 100 days, and I don't know how many countries you've been to, but
I think easily. It's been an amazing, amazing run and series of opportunities. And sure, Antarctica, Galapagos Islands, Japan, Southern Africa, the Baltic Sea, Panama, Costa Rica, Western Canada, Canadian Rockies, British Columbia, that area, Western United States, national parks, several different destinations in Italy. I'm probably leaving some off, but it's been an amazing run, and I'm just so thankful. It's been a lot of fun. It's great.
We got the Panama Canal itinerary video. It's like 3 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes.
A fun one to show you all.
The Isthmus of Panama and Costa Rica forms a narrow passage between two great continents. It's a place where diverse flora and fauna have concentrated over the millennium, on a land bridge that also separates the two largest oceans on the planet. It's a natural wonderland of staggering beauty and diverse, colorful culture, waiting to be explored. Spend 7 nights on a Panasonic Explorer Series ship and 4 nights in extraordinary hotels. Your Tauck journey begins in modern Panama City and a visit to the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Casco Viejo. Board your ship and explore the San Blas Archipelago. Transit the Panama Canal, a universal bucket list item. Visit the welcoming Embera people of the remote Darien province. In Costa Rica, enjoy the rainforests and picturesque beaches of Manuel Antonio National Park and the many other treasures of this magnificent country.
A monkey, right there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, over here.
Tauck delivers, right? You get to go a little bit further than anyone else does. So you get a little bit more special experiences than others would.
Come explore this incredible land of natural and man-made wonders, knowing that Tauck includes absolutely everything to ensure the trip of a lifetime.
So when we go on one of these shoots, we have to think about, what the deliverables are, and that's an example of an itinerary cut, as we call it. It's trying to capture a trip, in this case, a cruise. So, if you call up a res and they want to send you, hey, we've got a video on that trip, would you like to see it? Or, put it on our website, on our YouTube channel. But we also do other cuts. We do regional cuts where we might just capture a whole area of Italy or of Western Canada with no specific trip in mind, just trying to capture all of the ways that Tauck can show you that part of the world. And those are kind of fun because they're a little more artistic, and it's kind of like Denver showing off all of his best shots. And then we also have to keep in mind short edits for social media, Instagram. You can't have anything over a minute. So we'll deliberately do edits, these little short edits, to take advantage of those outlets, things like Instagram and Facebook. So it's fun. We've cut literally hundreds of videos. So we'll, after a shoot like that, we'll probably do, several major edits, and then, I don't know, Dustin, what, maybe 20 or more little shorts?
Yeah, it depends on what Denver captures. Obviously, he gets the whole trip and he gets the best stuff. But it's what we want to put together as a story or an experience that makes the most sense. So yeah, around 15 to 20 per video shoot, and then we'll use those in various outlets.
So if there's a marquee, hotel or resort, inside the park hotel, for example, we'll do a little short just on that. So if you're interested in knowing about that hotel rather than just reading about it, you can actually see it through Denver's lens. And we find that very powerful. It really gives you the ability to dig a lot deeper into what you're buying, to what you will be experiencing. Denver, we should talk a little bit about a typical day of shooting and what's it like.
Sure. One thing that's, I think, worth pointing out is that, for example, the video that you just watched, Panama and Costa Rica, we filmed that within the perimeters of a typical tour. So we were actually part of the tour. It's myself and a second cameraman by the name of Daryl Zucro, who is extremely talented. Most of the videos you see that I've worked on, he's been a part of as well, not always. So, we're working within the perimeters of a tour. We're going to spend the same amount for the most part, of time at any given location as the tour does, with some exceptions. Obviously, we'll get up earlier and go look at things and shoot when the light's good and that kind of thing. But, a typical day is getting started, having breakfast, coffee an hour before the sun is even beginning to rise. And so in the tropics, that's usually about 5 in the morning. And then getting out there and getting the light while it's good and trying to anticipate some of the places that we know we're going to be going to as a group, and capturing some shots of those when the light's good to kind of establish it and show the beauty of the place. And then it's a matter of going along with all of, with the tour, with the guests, and just blending in and capturing not only the place and what it has to offer, but also the reactions of guests and their experience there, because really that's what this is. It's a documentation of an experience, a guest experience on a Tauck tour. So it can be challenging, arriving at a place, having 45 minutes to really kind of get a sense of it, move through, get some high quality shots, and then also, you know, cover the reactions and the perspective of guests being there, and then, you know, hop back in the vehicle and go to the next spot and do that. But it's a challenge that I really enjoy. It's a lot of fun, because I think as a filmmaker, it forces me to really be focused, to work fast and efficiently, and you know, understand that I've only got this amount of time, and, you know, these are the goals to hit. So it becomes a real efficient process, I guess, of working, and a lot of fun. I mean, what we find is, in a typical tour like this, in a typical day, is we'll have guests that are more interested than others in learning about what we're doing and maybe even being a part of it. And so they'll offer, you know, hey, if you want me walking in front of looking at that view or whatever, I'd be happy to do it. And so that's always very helpful. But so, you know, we kind of, everybody becomes, who's willing, becomes a part of the team. And then obviously we rely very, very heavily as well on the tour directors and the local guides to give us information to kind of point us in the right direction. So that's a big part of it. So it's definitely, you know, we feel when we're on these tours that we're part of the experience overall. And then, you know, getting back to the typical day, I mean, we're not finished until the sun's gone, and in some cases even beyond that, because there might be, you know, a nice cultural experience going on, a dance or a dinner music that we want to capture as well. So, you know, a 15-hour day of shooting is not uncommon, and then multiples of that. So it's you know, it's hard work. It's wonderful, though it doesn't feel like work. And the benefit of the format of being on tour is that we also get to enjoy meeting people, and you know, we dine with guests when we can, when we have the time, and really feel a part of that experience as well. So that part, I've met so many wonderful people that way, and feel very fortunate for that. We might use, in a typical day, several different types of cameras. You know, one thing I should mention is, as digital kind of took over in the filmmaking world, everything's become a lot smaller and lighter and faster and easier to work with, which has really allowed us to do what we do in these travel films. You know, what used to take a lot more planning, a lot bigger equipment, more people, more money, all of that has been trimmed way down, and it makes it possible to go and come back with high quality material like this within the confines of a tour, without, you know, controlling things too much. It used to be, to go and get these kinds of shots, you really had to kind of control your environment, and you had to a lot of times work with professional talent, and, you know, it would overtake the experience of being on tour. It's not possible. But now I feel like we can do that because of equipment. Small camera here. I've got the cameras that we use. This is, you know, this is the biggest camera that we'll use oftentimes on a shoot. It's just a little handheld mirrorless camera that looks like a still photo camera, and then it's on what's called a gimbal stabilizer. And so if I have this, I don't even need a tripod in most cases. And then we have a drone, of course. We work with drones, and various other, you know, GoPros, or even in some cases a cell phone could come into play. But so in the course of a given day, you know, we might utilize all of these tools, or only one of them. And it's a lot of fun.
Hey, Denver, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm going to cut in there because we have some good questions coming in about just shooting travel in general, and one of them is specifically about drones. And since you just mentioned that, Denver, do you mind just going into a little bit about using the drones on tour and on location, and how often you use them, and how you use them? Basically, I don't know how to use them, but you know, you do. So, you know, how do you get those nice aerial views, and when and all that sort of thing? And just get a little bit more about drones, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, obviously the advantage of having a drone and the perspective that it brings to the table is to really get up high and get kind of an overview of things, right? And that's one case where a drone is great. If you want to set the stage, show kind of an overview shot before you go into, the nuance, the details of the place. But they can also be used to create very artistic shots that aren't big overview shots, maybe tracking with a boat, for example, with a ship in the water, or if someone's, even hiking on a trail, or looking at a vista, you can really provide that perspective of moving through that scene, maybe past the people, come back, look at them. I mean, it's just amazing what it allows you to do. And they become so small. I mean, they're, the ones we use are literally like this big. They'll pack up into a smaller package than that. So they're relatively low profile, quiet, but high quality in terms of an imaging tool. And so there have obviously been more restrictions, I would say, worldwide, as the popularity of drones has grown, and there was a surge in use, and oftentimes maybe being abused, using them in situations that either aren't safe or aren't respectful to the environment, that kind of thing. So the rules have gotten a little more strict in a lot of places, but there's also, the drones have gotten smaller, and so as they become less impactive, the rules have relaxed a little bit. And so it's been a really interesting progression to watch. But it's a tool, it's a necessary tool, I think, these days in every filmmaker's kit, on whatever level you're using it. So in our case, doing travel documentary, we tend to use the much smaller, lighter, faster, easier to deploy drones. And the shots that you can come away with are just amazing, both from, a motion video standpoint and still photography. Obviously on larger scale, motion picture productions, commercials, that you'll see them using much larger drones that require, a 2 or 3 person crew to manage and operate. But generally, I'll leave the hotel room on a given day, or the ship, or wherever we are, with a backpack that has a couple cameras, always a drone, and then maybe a GoPro little bitty camera, something like that, and just be ready to deploy whatever is appropriate in any given situation. But the drones have been a game changer, no question.
One thing about the use of the drone is you can use it in place of what can be very heavy and difficult equipment, like instead of having like tracks where you put a camera on tracks to get a shot, a panning shot, you can just set that drone up and have it go by a group, and you're not getting it way up in the sky, but that drone just took the place of a very heavy and expensive piece of equipment that would have done the same thing. And so, our whole thing is to be really small and light. And there's typically 3 of us on the shoot, one of us from Tauck, and Denver and Daryl or someone else. And that's it. Like often Daryl will be on a tripod with a long lens. Denver's right in with the guests and is like one of them. Often his camera's smaller than a lot of our cameras our guests have, but it's probably better quality, but it's in terms of size, very small. So we try to kind of, blend in there, and having some of this new equipment like drones really enables us to kind of just, we're not intrusive. We try to be just part of the group. And you get real reactions and real people, and people aren't intimidated. The last thing we want to do is disrupt the Tauck experience. So what we try to do is add value to that experience. And Denver's and Daryl and they're just great at giving advice and tips along the way. So sort of provides that little added value to the experience rather than imposing upon it.
Let's get into those tips a little bit,
Yeah.
Michael and Denver. Just while you're on, a travel shoot, while you're shooting travel, lighting, how much B-roll are you taking? That sort of thing, if you wouldn't mind just going into that a bit. And then I'll follow up with some more guest questions after that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, interesting with these shoots, in terms of lighting, it's typically very little, if any. We always bring a very small light kit, really small. Like we have these little tubes are about this long, and they're all LED. And the only time typically we use those is if we're setting up an interview situation in a place that just doesn't have enough available light. Occasionally we'll do some food shots, and it's nice to have some lighting to finesse those a little bit. But really, this production approach is about available light. And so working with whatever light that you have to work with and trying your best to time that and to manipulate the situation where you use that to your advantage, of course, the available light. Fortunately, the other fantastic aspect of digital technology is that the cameras and sensors have become a lot more effective and more sensitive. And so they can make what maybe 10 years ago would have been a rather poor lighting situation look actually beautiful. So that helps. So lighting is, I'd say that we bring with us is very minimal. It's an interesting approach that we've found works very specific to this type of thing, to documenting a tour and trying to bring back the material that we need to really tell the story. And that is, I always say the most important shots that we can get, and they're the AAA quality shots are authentic feeling, emotional shots of the guests, of you all enjoying the experience, being a part of it. You can shoot the beautiful stuff, you can shoot that's going to be there, and it's important to get that, and the animals, or whatever it might be. But what we're really there to capture is your experiences there. And so those are the most important priority shots. And that's what I'm constantly aware of. Do we have a nice balance of those? And not, just one or two a day. It's got to be in every situation that we're going to. And some, as you know, if you do a lot of traveling with Tauck, that can be many different situations in a given day. So to me, that is the primary challenge, and the kind of the grail that I'm constantly looking for and keeping an eye on. And then obviously you also need the environmental shots. You need to set the scene and come away with, whether it's cultural portraiture or beautiful landscapes or, nature, wildlife, whatever it is. So that's all there as well. To answer your question, Dustin, about B-roll, for those of you who don't know, B-roll is a term that goes back to when there were editing systems and you would have basically either two reels of film or two tapes, and you would cut back and forth between your A tape or your A reel and your B reel. And the A reel would have talking parts or interview footage or whatever it is. And your B reel would have just the cutaways and the pictures that would go over that. And so you're going back and forth between your A roll and your B roll. And so B-roll now has become the term that's used to refer to all of the shots that basically aren't people talking, aren't an interview. It's just kind of eye candy, if you will. It's the shots that really build the texture of the production of the film, and the color and the flavor and all of that. And so a lot of what we're doing is shooting B-roll. And so I consider it's kind of a hybrid approach in this situation. I consider the B-roll to be anything other than shots that are have guests in them that are experiencing the trip, because those to me are the key shots. That's the A-roll. Everything else is B-roll.
I don't think of the other days that I've shot with you, Denver, I don't think you've missed a sunrise or a sunset.
That's true.
So when long before other people are, the guests are up and about, we've got all the equipment loaded, and we're in place in the dark waiting for that sun to come up, and then when often we're skipping dinner because we want to get the sun set. So that's the B-roll, that's the eye candy. And often we have to get it before and after the tour, just to,
Right.
create that context of where we are in the world.
That's right. Absolutely.
Denver, so for the rest of us who aren't pros, give us a few tips that would make us better at capturing, whether it be a still camera or using our video capability on our iPhone, for example. What are some good tips on taking better shots?
Sure. Well, you know, primarily, first and foremost, I like to think of focus on the things that really move you, of course, and that's easy to do. You know, most people have a phone or at least a little camera, and it's amazing the quality that you can get. And so if there's something that you want to capture and that moves you and bring back, by all means, don't ever hesitate to do it if the situation allows. And so usually those shots that make you experience emotion or move you the most are going to have the potential to be the best shots, of course, right? So now, once you have that established, there's certainly technical aspects that will allow you to get better shots. And, you know, there's so many, but as a rule of thumb, I think a lot of people make the mistake of always feeling like if they're in a sunny situation, for example, and there's bright sun on a subject, that's the best angle to shoot that subject, sun coming from the front. And it's not always the case, because sometimes that situation can create contrast the cameras don't handle that well. And so the cameras just don't handle it as well as your eye does. You know, we have, our eyes are the best camera lens setup there is, of course. So we can handle contrast that most, even the best cameras sometimes can't handle. And so think about it in terms of maybe do a test shot, look at it. If it doesn't look right, if it looks too bright, okay, is there another angle that I can look at this from that will be a little bit more forgiving in terms of what the light's doing, what the contrast levels are doing. Shooting when the sun is behind subjects, not directly into the sun, but when the light is kind of behind them and maybe you're shooting into the shadowed side of a person or a building, can often be way more forgiving than shooting something that's directly sunlit. So now that's not always the case. Sometimes direct sun is great too, but don't be afraid, I guess, to play around with different angles and really study what the light's doing. And if you've got an interesting subject, play around with shooting it from different angles. That's definitely a tip that I like to give people. Don't just, you know, take the obvious picture from, you know, the overlook or whatever. Sometimes that can be the best, sometimes not. You know, play around with if you've got a camera, even an SLR or a little point and shoot camera, most of them these days have auto mode, and then they have a whole set of creative controls. And so I think it's really important to just become familiar and comfortable with as much of those creative controls in your camera as possible, to the point where you could, if you needed to, just purely shoot in manual mode and control everything. And then once you understand that, then you can start to build in some of those, you know, auto modes that allow you to and prioritize certain situations and shoot that way. But I think it's really important to just understand what all the different modes in your camera can do and go and play with it, even if it's in your backyard, a lot before you go on a trip, because then you'll have a better understanding of what the capabilities are of your camera and what situations and what controls work better. And by creative controls, you know, I mean your depth of field, your aperture, different modes like portraiture mode or landscape mode. What do those mean? What do they do? Why are they better for some things than others? So I find on a lot of these tours, as Michael said, we love to offer our knowledge and help people out as much as we can with their cameras. And so the most common thing that I find is that, you know, people come with these new cameras and they just haven't had the time to really go through them. And so I would encourage, if you know you're going on a trip to Africa or somewhere and you're going to get this new camera and lens, just spend some time with it, shooting the things around your house, around your neighborhood and your yard that you're familiar with, and in as many different ways as you can, so that you go into the trip with, you know, a pretty good base of knowledge about that. And then you know, and then obviously it's a constant journey. You'll continue to learn, and it's trial and error, and it's making mistakes and that kind of thing. You know, shooting in the early parts of the day, late parts of the day, obviously, angle of the sun is lower. It's more forgiving light. The intensity is less in most cases. And it can be the times when you get those, that light that really just sings, and you know, magic hour as they call it. But a lot of people I've noticed, sometimes when the sun sets, they put the camera away after the sunset's gone. And or they'll just shoot the glow in the sky, which is great. But that period of time right after the sun is gone or right before it comes up, we like to call that the glaze. And that can be the best, most forgiving light for faces, for people, for detail shots, you know, animals, all of that, where you know, you just, there's a magical quality to it. It's not too harsh, it's soft, it's warm. So think about that. Would be another one. Yeah. And if there's any questions, I don't.
Yeah, Denver, how do you, the one came through is kind of speaking to the animals more. How do you get those close shots of animals? And switching over to people, how do you get shots of people or different subjects without intruding on their privacy?
Right.
I'm sure is a constant struggle with you when you're out there. So two quick ones, one about animals, one about people, and see what
Sure.
people think.
Well, with shooting animals, obviously animals typically are way more sensitive out in nature than people, and hard to get close to in many cases, not always, but in any event, having enough lens flexibility to be able to having a long enough telephoto lens, obviously, to be able to draw in something that's far away closer to you. So, you know, if anyone goes on safari in Africa, obviously, you know, you're always looking for that big, long telephoto lens. You see the professionals there, and they're shooting 600 millimeter, 1,000 millimeter lenses, these giant pieces of glass, multiple pieces of glass. And so, but it is important to be able to you know, a telephoto lens compresses everything. It gets you closer to your subject. And in the case of animals, I think it's absolutely vital, critical that you have the lens that you need to get yourself closer. So, and, you know, but then you also want to think about, wow, maybe I'm going to find myself in a situation where I'm much closer to the animals than I thought I would be. And you have this really long lens, and then how are you going to get, you can be caught in a tight corner and not be able to really get the shot you want to because your lens is too long. So it's important to have a range. You know, a nice zoom lens with a range on it is really good. Some professionals prefer not to use zoom lenses because they tend to not be quite as sharp or as fast as your fixed focal length lenses. In that case, you're going to have multiple camera bodies. You know, you might have a wide lens on a camera and a long lens on a camera. But in most cases, just having a really good all-around zoom lens with a focal range from, say, 24 millimeter to 300 or something like that is a great lens for being on a safari, and in most cases getting the shots you want to get. If you want to get much closer, then you need to get a, you know, obviously longer lens. Now to your question on photographing people without being obtrusive, the same rule can apply. Having a longer lens, we like to use a 200 millimeter lens a lot for when we're trying to get shots of folks from their perspective are enjoying things without us, you know, being right in their faces. That kind of 70 to 200 millimeter range is really nice, and it allows you to bring things in a little closer. That being said, I really like the challenge of being right in there with people, and because it just feels more intimate. It feels less like you're voyeuristic or kind of watching from behind something, and more like you're right in there with them, and it's visceral, you can feel it. And so I think that becomes more of a personality thing, and just really becoming comfortable with people, getting to know them, coming across as not being overly aggressive, as just, you know, hey, ask them, you know, can I, is it okay if I get in there get some nice shots. This is a beautiful scene. Do you mind if I have my camera here with you? And most times, you know, people will be caught up in what's going on and they won't mind. And if they do mind, they'll tell you, and that's fine too. But I really like that challenge of getting up close and personal with people and getting those shots. And it's a challenge.
In 3 years, and you know, all those shoots, we've never gotten a single complaint about Denver or Daryl, you know, intruding, because they're really polite and they ask you, hey, is this okay? And you know, if you approach it right, you know, as I said before, the last thing we want to do is violate someone's, you know, privacy or intrude on someone's experience. So we're very mindful of that. Right.
Try to minimize the paparazzi approach, you know, and although we do get called that a lot, but in jest, in fun.
A technical one that came through here, Denver. What are the benefits and differences of mirrorless cameras?
Good one. So I use a mirrorless camera. I have a Panasonic Lumix GH5. The benefits are that you can, with a much smaller profile camera, lighter, get an optical quality and light sensitivity that is much better than, you know, first of all, the difference between an SLR camera. SLR is a single lens reflex camera, and it's an imager that's designed, the light comes through the lens, is reflected from a mirror onto the sensor. Okay, and a mirrorless camera takes that out of the game. The light comes through the lens directly onto the sensor without being reflected. So it allows for more light transmission, lower light sensitivity without a much bigger lens. With an SLR camera, you can, you know, you have these great imagers and they can be very light sensitive, but typically you're going to need a lens that's much bigger and faster. By faster, I mean a smaller aperture, larger aperture opening, smaller number. So, you know, the aperture is defined by f2.8 or f4 or f1.4 or whatever. So the smaller number, the larger the opening in the back of the lens, allows more light in. So if you're getting into, you know, a situation where you've got a really fast lens, it's going to be a really big lens in most cases with those larger SLR cameras because the imagers are bigger. There's a mirror in there. And so with the mirrorless cameras, and now they're, you know, they've come to the level of having full imager size mirrorless cameras, which are a little bigger, but just the transmission of light is so much better, and it's lighter and smaller. And they've become really, really good video cameras. I think the best small, light, fast video cameras are the mirrorless cameras now.
Denver, they're also better in low light situations, right?
Yeah, light sensitivity, low light situations, because you're not losing some of that light intensity that's reflected off the mirror onto the imager. Your light's coming right through the lens to the sensor. So, you know, the best
the ISO, right?
That's right. That's right. So you have a lot more range to work with, shooting at night, shooting in darker rooms, you know, early mornings, that kind of thing. And when you combine that with a fast lens, it's really amazing. It really is.
So we mentioned before, we're not bringing any lighting gear or anything except that little tiny LED bank.
Yeah.
But so if we're shooting a musical performance, we have to use available light, and those mirrorless cameras enable us to get good shots without lighting.
That's correct. And they just keep getting better and better with every generation. And the lenses get better. And so it's really an exciting time to be a filmmaker, you know, even an enthusiast, a hobbyist, whatever, because cameras are so great. And the same cameras that we're using to shoot video shoot fantastic still photography too. So you can be out there kind of doing both at times. So I always feel it's a challenge to really effectively do both, because focusing on still photos sometimes takes you away from the motion side of things, the video side of things, and vice versa. But it can be done, and sometimes effectively.
Three quick ones to end here, Denver, about recommendations for what to bring on tour. So, do you have any specific recommendations for a 4K capable camera? And what sort of, if you could only bring one lens with you, what range would it be? I know you said before 70 to 200, but I don't know if that's what you would recommend for just general shooting as well.
I really think I'll address the lens question first, since that was the most recent. So I think for a travel experience, something, if you want one lens that's going to cover it all, like a 24 millimeter to 200 or even 300 is a great way to go. With a lens that long, to keep it small and light enough to really be practical, you're going to lose some image quality over, say, a real high-end professional lens. But if you're not, if what you want to do is come away with some great photos to hang on the wall, and the quality will be great, it's just maybe not what the professionals are going to use, but that's okay, because you're there to capture some great images, bring them back, share your memories, put some photos on the wall, maybe even have a show and that kind of thing. A nice long range zoom is great. So 24 millimeters, 28 millimeters, up to 300 is a good way to go. But if you don't have problems changing lenses and traveling with a couple of lenses, I like the 70 to 200 and then the 24 to 70 as two separate zoom lenses to travel with. Just going to require you to change lenses or have two different camera bodies. Okay, and the next question was 4K camera, right?
Yeah, yep.
Two cameras that I like to recommend, two series of cameras, and they've got different levels depending on how much you want to spend. But Sony makes the A series cameras that are mirrorless. I think they're fantastic cameras, and you can, there's a whole range of them depending on how much you want to spend, and you can go and look at that, and probably some sticker shock when you get way up there. But the quality for what you get is amazing, and the prices have come way down compared to 10 years ago, what you could get for the money. And then the Panasonic Lumix G series cameras are what I use, because I feel like they shoot better quality video. It's just, they both shoot great quality video, don't get me wrong. I think Sony and Panasonic, both great cameras. Panasonic, I just like the look of that a little bit better. Now Canon, don't be afraid to look at Canon as well, because they do make fantastic cameras. They're now making mirrorless cameras as well. Tend to be a little bit more expensive as an entry level, but made in the USA. So take a look at Canon as well. And but with any of those, you can't go wrong. I mean, all of the manufacturers, all the brands are making great cameras. But I really, if you want to be light and still work with multiple lenses and not have a point and shoot camera, if you want to have a good camera with changeable lenses, I think the mirrorless cameras are the way to go, personally.
Cool. All right, one last one, and then we'll end with one of your shorts so people can see another piece of your work. So this is a fun one. If you can you name your favorite Tauck trip that you've shot on?
I was thinking about this earlier. That's a really hard. So overall, just experience, my favorite one.
Sure, yeah.
Well, I guess I'd have to say it was the Antarctica trip. I mean, just all in, an amazing experience, going to a place that I never imagined I would go, and really not knowing what to expect, and being so surprised on many levels, and rewarded on many levels. It was an amazing experience. It was also my first trip on a Tauck small ship experience, which was mind-blowing in and of itself. The fact that we went to Antarctica, obviously took that to a different level. But starting in South America, in Buenos Aires, and having that cultural experience, and then, going down to Ushuaia on the southernmost tip of the continent, Patagonia, and experiencing that for a little while, and then getting on this boat and seeing the, literally the end of the continent float away from you as you go toward Antarctica, and spending a couple of days crossing the Drake Passage, and then seeing the land for the first time, and stepping off of a Zodiac onto land in Antarctica for the first time was just I mean, I literally had to go find a place to sit down and was like misty-eyed, just take it in for a minute. It was really amazing. So yeah, and it was a lot of fun. Michael was there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's
we had
sorry, Michael, go ahead.
our days end with typically a production meeting to talk about what we captured, what we missed from the shot list, and what we're going to capture the next day. And we tended to do that on the ships. We always said deck 6, which was the little bar in the front on deck 6, and we would all meet there and have a beer and talk about what we accomplished that day and what we'd accomplish the next day. And boy, I just love those that time.
I should point out that that was often like midnight, and we'd
Yeah.
still be filming off of, out the window because there's the sun never
The
sets.
light
Right?
was
So
still good. Yeah.
we have this
We're
3-4
bringing
hours of
shots
just
with us.
magic light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
All
was
right.
amazing.
Cool. Well, let's end with a little clip from Antarctica. Since you just mentioned it, we will give everyone a quick clip of Antarctica.
Dustin, before you play that, can I just
Yeah.
real quick say, I just wanted to say thank you for all of you that participated, and it's an honor for me to be here. And thank you to the Tauck family, of course. It's been quite an opportunity. So
Thanks, Denver. All
Thanks
right,
so much.
let's pop this on the screen, and then we'll finish up with some closing comments. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how we shoot out on tour, learned a little bit about Denver, a little bit of tips as well. So thank you again, Denver and Michael. Anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
Thanks very much for joining us.
thank
Hope
you.
to see you out on the road.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope everyone has a good evening and a good weekend.